We have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Tim here. You're one of the people that has really transformed the venture capital industry today. You've helped so many different companies really get their footing in the space and helping to capitalize them so they can really make a great impact. I mean, you've been helpful to companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Baidu, and you've been pretty early adopter of Bitcoin too. Getting an opportunity to purchase it when in a kind of an unconventional manner, but you've been a big proponent of Bitcoin since. So I'm just excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Terrific. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me on your show.
Awesome. So Tim, where did your passion for, business leadership and venture capital begin? I know your family, there's a lot of venture capitalists and investors there, but this is your own choice to want to be able to be in this space. How did this kind of passion develop into the point where you're like, hey, I want to actually be a venture capitalist too?
Yeah, it was interesting. A long time ago, well, first, my grandfather was the first Silicon Valley venture capitalist, and my dad was a pioneer of venture capital, did a lot of venture capital. And so the last thing in the world I wanted to do was be a venture capitalist. And I started a few little companies, and then I went to business school. And coming out of business school, I had four ideas, and I couldn't choose which one. I didn't want to completely dedicate myself to any one of them. I guess I wasn't a true entrepreneur in that sense that I could throw myself completely into one of them. And I thought, oh, what they do is probably better suited for me.
Huh.
Uh, and so I joined Alex Brown out of business school, which was an investment bank, as one of their like two venture capitalists, but they really just wanted me to be an investment banker. And so I did a little bit of that. And then I said, not really for me to be in between. I like to be on one team or another.
Huh.
And I decided to spin out, and I took over something called an SBIC, a small business investment company, that my dad was running or had run, and he left it because he went off to go to the UNDP and to the Export Import Bank. And it was sort of left there with a few private companies in it. And it turned out I was able to go to the SBA and leverage those private companies that were valued at about $2 million to raise $6 million from the SBA.
Huh.
Now it's much more bureaucratic, doesn't have nearly as much flexibility, but at that time they only had 4 people working for the SBIC program. Now there are 800, and it doesn't work as well. And so I borrowed $6 million, and that's how I was able to build my record. Once I had a record, I brought in John Fisher. It took me, by the way, I went through I was on their watch list and then their dirt list, and it looked like they were going to call my loan. And I flew back to Washington and said, oh, no, this is great. And I convinced them to hang on for a little while. And then the IPO window opened up, and I had 5 IPOs in the portfolio. And I went from being on their dirt list to Venture Capitalist of the Year, SBIC Venture Capitalist of the Year. I was on their wall. And then with that record, I was able to go raise more money. I brought in John Fisher as a partner. The two of us went out and raised money. We raised a small fund. And then about 3 or 4 years later, we were about to raise another fund, and we brought in Steve Jurvetson, who had a really fine resume background, really incredible, like a perfect resume. And the 3 of us then built DFJ over time. And then we brought in a lot of other partners over when we were on the top of our game. We get bigger, broader, more money, whatever. And then we realized that we lost our way a little bit because it was too many cooks in the kitchen, and I couldn't get a deal done. I was 11 partners or something, and you bring it in. you bring in something great and then they'd all shoot it down, and then oh God, can't believe I can't get this thing done. And our returns went sideways. Although I spent most of my time on the international fund, and that actually did incredibly well. I got us into Baidu and Skype. Worked on the board of Skype, helped Baidu with their business plan, and those things ended up doing incredibly well. And so that international fund went very well. But then when I realized that 12 partners were hard to get a deal through, I started saying, look, if I can't get it done here, I want to do it myself. I was pretty rich. And they said, okay, whatever. I had to get clearance from the LPs. And they said, fine. And then I realized I was way outperforming, and it wasn't right for me to stay in a partnership where I was responsible for that money, and the money that I was spending that I was doing on my own was outperforming. It was not a healthy setup. So I just decided to start investing my own money. That's when I started Draper University of Heroes. I created the show, Meet the Drapers. I took over the Draper Network, venture capitalists, and I did I bought the Bitcoin. I was able to do those things that a partnership would never have allowed. And from there, I realized I had a monster deal flow from all those things. And I realized that it was more than the money I could put in. So I started to raise outside money. And I did it with my son, Billy. The two of us made a great success of what we called Fund 5. And now we're on Fund 7. Billy is now on his own. And Billy now spun off and he decided to do his own thing. He's doing great with Path Ventures. And Adam, my other son, started Boost, which is an accelerator. It started as an accelerator for Bitcoin. Now it's all any deep tech he's totally into. My daughter started her own venture fund, focused more on entrepreneurs that have women in the founding team. And so we have it in our family. It's really become a big deal. They're all incredibly good at it, better than I am. So somehow it's like the gene pool has accelerated the ability to think forward. And so then on my own, then I started to bring in a few partners. I started to do some of the similar things, but I just made sure that I was the final decision on any investment. We've done incredibly well, like beyond belief well, in each of these funds. And we hit Bitcoin just right. We're right on top of AI. Somehow we seem to be able to find those entrepreneurs that are doing just the right things. And weirdly, the school, I had to beg the kids of my friends or anybody who was in their 20s to come to the school at first. Now it's the hardest school in the world, other than maybe IIT Bombay, to get into. Huh. It is, we've had about 4,000 students. 1,000 have started their own business. 5 of those are unicorns so far. They've come from 102 different countries to come to Draper University. And where Harvard and Stanford say 85% of our graduates go off and have a job, we say our average graduate creates 7 jobs. We only take them for 10 weeks. They create 7 jobs. They take them for 4 years, maybe 8, 85%. Get a job. We create 7 jobs. And then the show, Meet the Drapers, I couldn't get my mother to watch at the beginning. And then over time, We're now on our seventh season, and I guess we just crossed. I think we've just crossed the 100 million viewer mark
Wow.
around the world. Um, it's only starting in the U.S. now, but we've been all over India, all over Brazil, all over Taipei, um, all different parts of the world. Huge following. And it's been incredibly good for the entrepreneurs who get on it. And so that has now generated some great deal flow for us. So, if you start something and you just keep going at it, it kind of, you have to kind of maneuver your way, but eventually you'll get to wherever you're headed. And I feel that way. I'm, 65 now. And I feel like I just kept taking the next step and I just kept working and things uh, things have just worked out. So people say, oh, and I'd say before anybody else, I'd say I was lucky. But I would also say that it's amazing. The more hard work you do, the luckier you get.
Huh. So Tim, how has it changed, like in terms of how you viewed doing deals initially? Like there were certain fundamentals you looked at. How has that evolved over time to what you're doing now? Is it really super similar, or is it very different in terms of the deals you'll go into versus now beginning out versus now?
Yeah, I'm willing to pass up all the sure things, the things that seem sure things. At first, I was always thinking, I want to do these long shots, but I also want to do the things that are going to keep the wheels on the bus. But
Huh.
it turns out that all the money that we've made has been on the odd, unusual, the the one where I don't know, 7 out of 10 people would say that's a crazy idea or why would we
Huh.
ever do it? And maybe 2 or 3 out of 10 might say, might be worth a shot. Those are the ones where we've made all our money. And they go after one thing and they turn into something else. And I think that there's something magic about that pivot. All these companies pivot, all our biggest winners, they all pivoted.
Huh.
Skype was going after shared Wi-Fi. Um, the Baidu didn't really even have a business model until we started working on it. The Tesla, when we seeded Tesla, um, they were going to use they did use a Lotus body, but then they decided to make the whole car. And Elon was also a pivot there because it started with Martin Eberhard, and then Elon came in with money and leadership, and he really made the thing hum. Yeah, all our biggest winners took pivots. Bitcoin, my God, Bitcoin's had pivot after pivot after pivot.
Mhm.
Still, it's unbelievable what it's going to do for the global economy. In
What did you
fact,
see?
I don't think, people your age don't have to be told this, but I don't know, 7 to 10 years from now, I don't think retailers will even take fiat money. I don't think they'll take dollars. I think at first they'll take Bitcoin, then they'll realize, hey, I get an extra 2% when I take Bitcoin. And then they're going to say, we don't take fiat because they're not going to want it. As soon as I can buy my food, clothing, shelter, and pay my taxes all in Bitcoin, no reason to own a dollar.
Huh.
So anyway, that's taking you off the track, but there's going to be I mean, I am imagining a very scary run on the banks when the retailers stop taking dollars and
Huh.
only take Bitcoin. That's going to be really awful. So hopefully people will be more relaxed because they'll all own Bitcoin before that happens.
Mhm. So, what did you see in Tesla early on that made you want to back it? And also with Skype, like you mentioned it was something entirely different and it pivoted. What did you kind of see in the? Maybe, was it the teams? Was it the product they had? Like, what certain dynamics made you want to be able to be involved? Because there was a lot of people that especially with Tesla, that were not going to get in that early, that didn't believe in the concept.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. This guy, Ian Wright, um, came to our shop and he said, "Hey, you want to ride in my electric car?" And I thought, sure, whatever. So it'll be like, because we did another electric car and it was like a golf cart, kind of fell apart, but it was worth it to try it. So I get into the car and he goes, "Okay, strap yourself in." And he's got a 5-point seatbelt. And I went, "What? This is an electric car." I was thinking I was getting into a golf cart. And he goes, "No, no, just strap yourself in." So he takes me out there onto 280 and it's like, whoa, the fastest thing. It took off like a rocket. My head was slammed against the back. And then he turns around at the exit, comes back, and then he goes, "Watch this." And he comes within, God, I don't know, 60 feet maybe of a stop sign going 60 miles an hour. And he stops the thing on a dime. And I went, whoa. I thought, wow, you don't have to be like a golfer or a tree hugger to want an electric car. And this is going to be important. So then I went to all the hobbyist things. I went to the trade show of the electric car companies, and there were like, people doing different things. And I'd ask everybody, "What are you doing?" And they tell me all about it. And they'd say, "And the reason we're better than Tesla is this." And I went, "Okay, I got to go find Tesla." So I went and found Tesla. Martin Eberhard was running this car, and he had kind of a cool technology where all the batteries could go in parallel. You could use lots of little batteries instead of one big lithium ion battery. One big lithium ion battery would explode. So he could use lots of little ones. And if one of them exploded, he could route around it and it wouldn't be a big fire. And the torque would be much higher because you could do them all in parallel. And I thought, you go for the one with the most best technology. And so we decided to put some money into Tesla. It was pretty contentious within the partnership, but we got it in. And then the company was out of money, and Elon comes in and he says, "I'll put in another 10 million." I think Elon was an earlier investor and an active investor. And then he said, "But I got to run it." And we're all kind of going, "Wow, win-win." We get Elon Musk to run it, and he took it, and I don't think anyone could have done what he did. Elon, he got $400 million from the U.S. government on a loan. He got the Numi plant for 5 cents on the dollar in Fremont. He did magical things. And then he reinvented what a car was. He turned it into like a computer with wheels. That S car, that's one of the biggest breakthroughs in all of history. You could almost call it something else. And now all those other Cybertruck, all that stuff is great. How we got into Skype, I remember the argument in the partnership was these guys are outlaws because they had done what was Kazaa, which was a file sharing system. Everybody was using it for their music, and which then the music industry started to call it pirating, and that won over the zeitgeist. It's interesting. Those are PR battles. It could have gone any number of ways. Napster, Kazaa, they could have been trillion-dollar businesses, but somehow it went a different way. And the zeitgeist drove that a little bit. So anyway, but I love these guys. I knew something was going on in uh, in shared file sharing, and that there were going to be more applications than just music. And so I looked around, and then I read somewhere that these two were going off to do something new. And I asked a guy who worked with my father to go, because he was in Europe, to go check these guys out. And he said, go check them out. Howard Hartenbaum. He said, go check them out. You got to go visit. So I flew out, met with Nicholas, and Giannis may have been there too, but Nicholas did most of the talking. And they sold me on shared Wi-Fi, and I said, sure, I'll do it. And then they call me. They say, before you write your check, this is what we're going to do. We're going after the phone companies. I said, even better. And it took off. They had some maneuvering they had to do. People were saying voice over IP was the target of the phone companies and Congress. It's like every time you got a big winner like that, it does hurt the status quo, and the status quo has to change their thinking or attack. And so they attacked, but they attacked voice over IP. Well, it turned out Skype said, well, we're not voice over IP. We're different. We're file sharing. We're different technology. Go ahead. Go after voice over IP. So the battle went over there while Skype got hundreds of millions of users. So we and eventually they sold that. I was on the first Skype video call just because I had to be in two places at once. I had to be in Tallinn at their board meeting, and I had to be in Palo Alto. And I asked them if they could do a video conference. And at that time, video conference was really tough to come by. I said, can you rent that expensive equipment? They said, oh, no problem. And I'm thinking, in Tallinn, Estonia? And I thought, well, maybe it's more advanced than I thought. But all they were doing was saying, we're going to just try it. So they tried it out. I didn't know it until after we had already done the video conference. I didn't know that they had set it all up. So yeah, it was fun. And yeah, so that's how I got into those two. How I got into Bitcoin. I got into Bitcoin when it was $4 a Bitcoin. $4. And I thought I bought $250,000 worth at $4, which would be, of course, worth a couple billion, right? That now went into this guy who was going to mine it for me, but he couldn't get the equipment to mine it because they were front running him on the equipment. And then he put whatever he did mine into Mt. Gox. So the whole thing kind of disappeared. And I thought, that's the end of Bitcoin. What a disaster. But Bitcoin didn't disappear on that news that Mt. Gox stole the money. And so I thought, well, there must be something here. So then I did a lot of deep research. And then I realized, oh boy. And so I started buying Bitcoin at a little bit at 30 and a little bit at 1,000. And then, a little bit at 30 and a little bit at 100. And then it was about 618, and the U.S. Marshal's Office said, we have this Bitcoin that we've confiscated, and we're doing an auction. And everybody around me was talking about how they would pay below market and how much below they were going to bid. Huh. And I thought, well, if you want it, this is going to either go to the moon, or it's going to, either it's a whole new global economy, or it's going to go to zero. So I wanted to make sure I got some. So I bid above market, and there were 9 lots. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get 1 or 2. Well, I got all 9. And I thought, well, that was more Bitcoin than I was anticipating buying. But then I thought, oh, I'm okay with it. And then Bitcoin went from 632 down to 180. And I thought, well, I still believe, you know, whatever the market is saying, I think they're missing something. And so I just hung on. And then I bought more in the second auction, which was at an even lower price. But I was only able to buy like one uh, of the pieces. And I used that to buy into some startups with Bitcoin. And I learned that the systems were not in place yet. I had to pay triple the accounting bill after I spent hours training my accountants. So the whole thing was a nightmare. And the companies I put Bitcoin into for pieces of the Bitcoin, most of them just turned it right into dollars and, built their businesses or did whatever. The ones who didn't actually lasted a lot longer and became at least decently successful. Although I got a 10x on one of them if it's in dollar terms, but it was where I gave them 300 Bitcoin, I got back 15 Bitcoin. So it was 10x in dollar terms, but minus whatever 80% in Bitcoin terms. Very interesting to think about that. If you're clinging to your dollar, just look at what it just continues to happen to the dollar against Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions? It looks like we're running up against it.
Yeah, just the last question that I have, Tim, is you've done a lot of different things throughout your life already. You've been involved in many companies. But what are some things that you aspire to accomplish now? Something maybe you haven't done that you want to do? What are some of your future short-term and long-term goals?
Yeah, I thought I was very lucky because I got into the internet at just the right time. And I rode that one really well. And I was thinking, well, that's a good life. I have done some great stuff. I've been able to be involved in some things that have really been, changed the globe in many ways. Being able to email people like this or Skype with people, Zoom calls like this, or I guess it's Riverside. But, and then Bitcoin showed up and I went, oh my God. I fired back up and I thought, I get to do it again. I get to do another career that just totally changes the whole planet and moves us anthropologically forward. And now it looks like AI is going to do it again. So I sort of feel like there's so many things that look like they can be done. And I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. And the only speed bumps in the road are weak politicians who feel like they've got to control it. Strong politicians are embracing the change, and great things are going to happen. Great things are going to happen. I mean, Bitcoin has also got the blockchain, and it's created these DAOs, and DAOs could be the future of governance. That's a big opportunity for the ultimate long-term, I don't know whether you call it aspiration or survivability of humanity. DAOs are going to be amazing ways to govern. They'll be able to be like sandboxes for governance, and I think they're going to be really extraordinary. And AI, my God, it's so cool that and I had an opportunity. I knew Sam Altman, and I should have just been on top of him for what he was doing next, because I could have been in open AI. But we're still in Otter. We're in a bunch of these companies that are great AI companies, and what you can do with AI is quite extraordinary. I think it's the equivalent of all of us were like monks copying the Bible over and over and over, and all of a sudden some genius invented the printing press and we don't have to do it anymore. I think the same thing's happening with AI. We used to have to search for everything, do everything. Now AI is going to be able to do a lot of things for us. It's going to be amazing what AI does. So, I think I'm fortunate in that I've been able to look beyond today or this week or this paycheck. And I've been able to sort of project out 5, 10, 15, 20 years in what could possibly happen out there. If I were to give advice to anybody who's 20 or 30 years old trying to start a business, I would say take some time to project out and spend some time figuring out what everybody else is doing in the entrepreneurial world so that you can kind of see, even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, you can kind of see where the world might be headed and where you might fit into it. Or even go beyond that and project to where the world might go further, and then you become an entrepreneur. So, and project far enough out so that you're not whipsawed by some technology. Go out 15, 20 years. So I think that's a benefit I've had throughout my life, as I've been able to project out to what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now, rather than, how do I just keep my life going?
Mm. Tim, appreciate you coming on. I think that that's definitely helpful advice to be really forward thinking. But thanks for sharing your story and showcasing the steps so people can emulate them. I mean, you really have a great journey and you've done a lot to impact the world positively. So I'm excited for what you'll continue to do and appreciate you coming on. Thanks.
Terrific.